I just remember being in like my dining room recording. We did 3 attempts on that first podcast.
It was bad.
Well, Mose, how's the kombucha I made you? Come on.
It's better than the tequila shot that we just took.
Can we not say that we did that in the podcast? I think we're trying to stay brand friendly, guys. Eventually, maybe, who knows what's going to happen. But so I gave him my kombucha, homemade. Guys, check it out. I'll make an Instagram soon. Make some content around that with the podcast. Maybe sell it. I don't know. And we got the sparkling water. So we are certified bougie right now. Welcome to Toronto.
Buzzing.
So for those who don't know, Mose is from Thunder Bay.
The best place on earth.
The best. And he came to Toronto for school. And when we graduated, the global pandemic hit. So he had to move back, and thank God he's in Toronto so we can do our first in-person interview. This is kind of crazy.
Special, eh?
I feel like I don't even know you.
No.
I only know your voice.
Yeah, voice of an angel.
It's a bit tough. Like I like it that way because, my God, this guy does not clean up. I'll tell you that much.
Barn animal.
Yeah,
okay,
well.
So I'll fill for you. Will you grab your water? It was great to be back in Toronto. I was dropping off my older brother, so we went down to Queen and I forget the street. Anyways, on the way back,
Ossington, you fucking.
On the way back, I took the scenic route. I went by Ryerson. I went by our friends at Church and Wellesley. They were lovely. I saw the whole city, so it was great. It's weird. It like I felt it when I came back the other time. I was like, nothing has changed, but this just like it feels so different.
It's just empty.
Yeah.
And like no culture.
Yeah. Well, it was weird seeing there's so many different people here. You don't see that in Thunder Bay. Very white.
Very mono.
Yeah.
Monochromatic.
It was refreshing to see so much culture in Toronto.
Yeah.
Despite what our friend Kyle Moore might think about.
Yeah, Moorsey. Thanks for watching. All right. So we thought we would just do this like year-end review, like just in person. We thought reflect on what we've done. Like I can't believe we've done 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like this kind of blows my mind. I remember when we started, I fucking carried this show. I was putting it on my back. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
We talked about this off the podcast.
We did. And hold that mic closer to your face. God damn it. Still learning. I gotta keep this pen. This is brutal. Anyways, yeah, I was kind of carrying it because I was just like really down to do it. And then I think 2 months in or something, the tables completely turned.
Flip the switch.
We were like, we got to do like, more content for Instagram. We got to do like graphics. No
one was listening to the podcast.
And for those who don't know, I'm terrible at graphics.
You're bad. You are bad. For somebody who spends as much time as you do doing video stuff, which is like directly beside design stuff, you are terrible.
All right. Thanks for the words of encouragement. And I've tried to learn from Mose, but it turns into me opening up Photoshop with him, and then he just starts working and doesn't say anything. He just skips all the steps.
So many people have this problem.
We'll eventually figure that out and learn how to do that.
And then try to sell you something.
Yeah, exactly. Link in bio. Anyways, so we wanted to review what was going on, and I think like the most important thing we should talk about is that switch from mainly doing like podcast drop photos and then also like micro content, like clips from the pod. That was kind of a method that worked for a bit, but then we switched to these carousels, which you were taking the lead on and doing like a shitload of work. Like I was just editing the podcast, posting some things, but like you doing these carousels, I think launched our brand or the awareness of the podcast like tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all you got?
That's all I got. No,
you don't want to tell people how you do it and what's going on? Or do you want me to just continue to carry the show?
Carry the show. We're going to go back to the first 2 months.
Okay, the first 2 months, like, I just remember being in, like, my dining room recording. We did 3 attempts on that first podcast.
It was bad.
I think Mose told a story that could have been done in 2 minutes in 8 minutes or something like that. It was like brutal,
terrible.
I was like nervous.
Well,
and, like,
it's
sweating.
awkward on Zoom because you don't know when to cut in. It's all like there's a delay on Zoom, and you're like, I don't want to be rude. In person, I just cut you off.
Yeah, standard.
I'd catch you in the trolley tracks and just see ya.
It was also tough, like figuring out where to record. Like I was doing it by the router, and then I eventually got like the Ethernet adapter. And then you were in like the basement. It was like
Yeah.
terrible. I remember getting video like people were texting me about. They're like, "Why is Mose always wearing sunglasses on the podcast?" And two, why is his video quality like
So bad.
like 84p or whatever the lowest would be, or 144p? But like, yeah, it was just hard to like adapt. And we took 3 tries, and then we finally got that first step. And I think people liked it.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you were doing all the editing stuff, because I would have been cringing so badly. Like it was completely hands off for me, which is nice. Because I didn't even listen to the first, I didn't go back and listen to the first one. I was like, it's out there. Great. Let's keep
I haven't listened
going.
to a single podcast that we've made. Listen to some clips. So I edit them, so I guess I listen to them. But that, I thought I would hate editing the podcast, but it's not bad. I
Really?
just listen 2 times speed. I'm listening through the whole thing, and like I mean, sometimes I cringe at the stuff I do. Like on that Mo episode, I remember like telling my girlfriend about it before bed because it was like making me just cringe. Like, you know, when you're like, you do something kind of cringy and like you try to fall asleep that night and you
it
just
comes up
can't
out of
stop
nowhere.
thinking about it, and you're like, what has my life come to? But yeah, I was like he was like saying something, then I interrupted him. I'm like, dude, like that, man, I fuck with that. And I started going off about like my girlfriend blowing up on TikTok. It's like, do you want to like have that millionaire lifestyle, like blah blah? And I was like, and then I end my little tangent, and he goes, yeah, Mose, you said something about dogma, and I was like, I didn't add anything. This guy probably thinks I'm crazy. I was like yelling, like that made me cringe editing that. But besides that one cringy moment it's not even cringe. It's not cringe, but like in my head, I thought it was cringe. Besides that, it was like easy to edit the pod.
Yeah. I feel like everyone who has a podcast has this conversation multiple times where they're like, we were so cringe when we started and now we're better. But are we? Are we actually?
Well, I've been listening to Impulsive a bit, Logan Paul's podcast.
Fantastic.
I went back to episode 1 of
Yeah.
what they were like. They're like episode whatever, 200 something.
They've been buzzing.
Dude, they were not good. Like, you're not good right away. Even these guys who are like superstar, like just creators and like really confident guys. Like, I was listening, I'm like, they're interrupting their guests. First of all, their first guest was a sex doctor or like a sex specialist or whatever it was. It was like super awkward conversation. And then 3 minutes in, Mike Malak just goes, yo, I need 5 minutes. Like, I gotta go. Like, he just like randomly gets up and everyone's like, what the fuck?
What
And
are you
they're freaking out.
doing?
And he actually, I was reading the comments. He wrote about it in his book. He's like, the walls started closing in. I was sweating. It felt like 400
Oh,
degrees.
really?
Dripping sweat, like freaking
Stage
out.
fright.
Like super serious like issues like mentally and with like, I guess, confidence, I guess. I don't know. But he came back and killed the show. But this kind of shows like, you know, we feel like we're bad, but like so does everyone else, even the guys who are like at the top.
Yeah.
I'm sure didn't feel that
Millions
good.
and millions of views.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, besides that, I mean,
That podcast has done wonders. I think they started that shortly after the Suicide Forest thing with Logan, when everyone wanted to cancel that guy.
no, I think it was like right before the first. I think, yeah. When was Suicide
I think
Forest?
it was
2018?
Suicide Forest 2018 or 2017.
I think it was a good move to do that because
He's
I always
so
thought,
relatable now. Like people don't think he's a bad guy, which you couldn't say back then.
because the vlogs and when he's like in entertainment mode, he's
Yeah.
like a character of
Yeah.
himself. And like it's just short
Easy to
snippets.
hate.
Whereas the podcast, I'm listening to him talk, I'm like, this is just a dude. He's just 25, like, you know, is talented, likes what he does. And like, I don't agree with everything he says, but at least he's like, excuse me, at least he's honest and just like chats.
Mhm.
I just feel like I can relate to him. And same with Mike, the 35-year-old. You're pretty much Logan Paul.
35-year-old streamer. You have to get on Twitch, then it'll be complete.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one of us has to make a lot of money.
Or I got to kick you off the pod and get like a 16-year-old or something.
Where did that come from? You lost. You
I don't know.
Completely lost
All
me
I'm
there.
saying is they have like a 10-year divide. We only have a 2-year divide. So I'm thinking I get rid of you.
two in age, 10 in body.
As in, I have he's a child's body. But yeah, like I want to get into you. Like you at first were not super invested in the podcast. Like I was kind
That's
of,
putting it lightly. That's a beautiful euphemism.
I mean, you showed up and like you didn't like hate
Record it.
but like why were you someone, why did you like do that thing where I'm always reaching out, like post this, do this, let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go. Like
Yeah.
why? And then now you're the one messaging me sometimes,
Getting
or
on you.
posting the graphics, making the graphics like crazy. Like
Yeah.
where did you switch?
I don't know. I think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it's not just the podcast. It's definitely been other places. I think school is a great example because there's been tons of times where I'm like just completely checked out of assignments and stuff. But I think for me, at least, part of it's that I want some level of control, and like I think that if I'm invested to get invested into something, I think it's important for me to like self-initiate in some way. So when somebody else is like, we have to do this, or we have to do that, or we have to like post this graphic, a lot of the times that's like me kind of pulling away because I'm like, I don't have my own like fingerprint on this project. But that changed because I was like, oh wait, like these people are doing it differently. Like they're not just posting all of their stuff like broadcast. We were in broadcast mode. That's what I think. Where we were like, we recorded a podcast and then we would post a couple graphics, be like, watch this, like consume this without providing any value, I think. And so that flipped when I was like, wait, we can on-ramp people better by just like posting a clip and then like following that up with like a story. That was the biggest switch for me. And I was like, oh wait, this is great. I can do this. And it wasn't like, it didn't take a bunch of time. So I was like, I can put in 30 minutes or an hour of work right here and we can get like 2 or 3 times the value out of the single post. And I was like, this is great. And then from there, it just like kept spinning and getting better.
Switch flipped 2 months in, but it's not just like in the graphics. It's also like just showing up for the podcast, like ready to go and excited and like having phone calls where we're planning shit where I'm like, oh, you're like invested. I don't know what happened. Maybe it's like once we hit that like 5 episode mark where you're like, oh, like
this is something now.
I'm enjoying it. It's weird because like, I don't know. I guess you need someone in your life who's like, this is such a fucking attack. I don't mean this as an attack. Like you need someone in your life to like kick your ass, like set the fire, and then you go get started, and then you have your own fire once someone like you're like a giant boulder at the top of a hill. All you need is someone just to like give the little nudge and then you sprint.
Yeah.
You know, like because you have so many ideas and you're like a dude who's always reading and learning. I'm not. I really should start. I'm kind of like the guy who's just executing. So I think we like play off each other really well, that yin and yang, where we're like, you have these great ideas and then I kind of execute them, I guess.
Yeah.
Not when it comes to the graphics, of course, but when it comes to just like getting the shit done in the pod.
Yeah, which is important. And that comes up a bunch when I talk to people. They want to like talk about ideas or like starting their own thing. And they always say like, oh, you and Will have a great partnership. And I'm like, yes. But it's because like we cover bases that we don't have. And it was cool because I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, one of the first things he did was hire I don't know who it was from, but they poached an executive from like Microsoft or one of the other big tech companies precisely because he thought that one of the reasons that Apple had failed in his first stint is because they were terrible at executing stuff. So it's like one of these, and same thing with Elon Musk. Like I think Tesla's been very open about poaching a bunch of talent from Amazon and from Google to help Elon execute on stuff. And I think it's kind of the same idea. I'm not comparing us to that, obviously, but it's the same kind of idea where like, I think I'm old enough now where I'm like, I'm not good at everything. Like I have some blind spots that I'm like, if I don't have people that are kind of pushing me where I'm not good, like things will just not get done. Which is great because you're always like, even though in the moment sometimes I'm like, this is so annoying that he's like messaging me about hashtags or about like posting on the different platforms. But I'm like, after the fact, I'm like, oh, that one post. I think a great example of this was we had Rod Jules on 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Shout out Rod Jules.
Shout out Rod Jules.
That was a great interview. Love that.
Great
guy.
interview.
Really nice guy.
He's been posting some fire too. Anyways,
hey, he's been posting a lot more since our conversation. So thanks for the tag or whatever in the mention in the caption. But
you're welcome.
You're welcome.
I was gonna say, I remember the night that I was making his teaser post that we were gonna post. I didn't want to do it at all. I think I was playing Call of Duty with my boys, and I was like, I don't want to sign off right now because the buzz is great. And then you were messaging me, you're like, is the teaser post done? I don't respond. 3 hours later, ? What's going on? This is pretty classic. And it was like 8 or 9 at night, and I was like, I have to get this done. Kind of rushed it, did it quickly, didn't really expect anything, and that post turned out to be like our best performing post of all time.
I don't think it was a teaser. Wasn't it the page post? Or was it the teaser?
It might have been the swipe.
Yeah, I think it was the swipe. That was a really good post, and like his friends like came out in droves. Like they were like super supportive, which was great. But I want to go into this. Like what? I'm going to go into 2 hates. So the first one is, what do you fucking hate about the podcast? Like what is some shit where like you wake up, you know it's a podcast work day, and you're like, fuck,
I think it's there's stuff that I hate when we're actually recording. Usually like we're pretty good about, and we've gotten better. We've gotten a lot better about trying to batch record, because the second one that you record in the day is always better because you're warmed up. Like we have this classic thing where like if you're recording with somebody that you don't know, you have to like budget in that first 10 minutes where it's like trying to start your car in the middle of January and it's like freezing cold and your battery's dead. Like it's just always like slow and tough to get into. So I don't like that. And I don't like recording in the morning sometimes because I'm always a guy where I'm like, I need to get my gym in, and then I want like 2 hours to like create something, because I always feel like if it gets to like 1 or 2 in the afternoon and I haven't made anything or I haven't done like the most important thing that I need to get done in that day, I'm always like dreading it for the rest of the day, and it's always like a struggle to get started. So recording in the mornings always for me is like, I'm gonna have to sacrifice that time that I love to be making stuff because I know that we're gonna record. But like after I'm done recording, I'm like, that conversation was, and most of the times like that conversation was fire. I love that we like did that.
Unless it's a guest I brought on that you don't know, and then you just sit there quietly for about 2 hours.
Okay, no,
bored.
that's another thing that I hate. I hate that like we have gotten smarter about and I guess part of this is like working together and getting more comfortable, but I hate, it's always a balance when you're having a good conversation and you're not the person that's kind of like driving the bus, where it's like you're asking a bunch of questions and the guest is like getting comfortable and you're getting something out of them. I'm always like, do I ask this question? Like I don't want to take the vibe that's going on right now and kind of like take it off track, but I feel like I need to ask this question because I want to get this person's it's always a struggle to like ask questions and like work yourself into a conversation.
You honestly, I think you just have to bulldog your way in.
Yeah.
Like it's as simple as like cutting people off.
Yeah.
And just interjecting and like not being afraid to do that. Like sometimes I feel like I don't know if afraid is the right word. I'm just going to use it because I can't think of another one. But like you're afraid to, like I'm asking all these questions and I have a million things I need to keep this podcast interesting and keep it going.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you're not jumping in sometimes when you could just like cut me off.
Yeah.
And I can just take that audio of me going like out of the podcast. Like, you just go in, you know?
And I think that's something that you would only know because you edit the podcast.
Yeah.
It's not so obvious to me.
Yeah. You just interrupt me or be like, yo, one second, I got this. Or like, we also came up with our new little sign, two hands like this on your ears. That's when you're going to talk. And then if the person saw you do that, they do one ear. So like we have that going. I also was watching the Spittin' Chicklets YouTube video.
Like finger signs.
I saw Whitney was telling Grinelli, or not telling, like he went like this on like the stream, and then Grinelli's like, oh yeah, so there's a story like Whit was telling me about, and like he like teed up the story for Whit.
Yeah.
And I see Biz like does this and shit. Like it's little hand signals, but I guess that looks a bit weird when you're watching the video.
Yeah.
Also,
but most of the times, like if you're watching it, like I don't know about you, but if I'm watching a video on YouTube, like I'm not there for the video per se. I'm not going to watch it the whole time. Usually I'll like bugger off and do a million different things.
Well, if you hear something, well, for me, I do the same. But if I like hear them say something that's kind of like funny or like ridiculous, like I'll rewind and watch like what their reactions were, because it just adds an extra like level. Yeah. And I'm even noticing right now, like Zoom sucks.
Zoom's bad.
Zoom sucks.
It's so tough
with the latency too on some ends. Like right now,
Wi-Fi. Hello.
I'm loving this. This is good, guys.
There's no delay.
We have a couch. I have a spare couch if you want to sleep over a couple more days. We do batch episodes.
Some podcasts.
That'd be good. But so you're not asking me what I hate, so I'll just answer for myself. Dude, I hate the micro content. I like editing the podcast.
What about the micro content do you hate? Selecting it, exporting it.
Okay, here's the thing. So I'm editing the podcast. I'm in this mode like I'm like clicking away. And then I have to also think, okay, mark this point, write a little caption for the marker. This is like what was said in this micro content. So I have to do that for all like the pieces through editing it. And then afterwards I have to like duplicate that sequence, call one before I even like edit it for YouTube. And like I just like cut it first with like the markers. Then I have to duplicate that and make like a micro content sequence.
Yeah.
Then I have to like find the parts where they like say the interesting stuff. I have to cut out the like dead air parts. So it's like fast, choppy micro content.
Yep.
I have to like scale up, put the text, like there's so much to it. And then I got to post, plus I have to edit the final podcast. There's so much going on. Like you're kind of task switching in a way. And I'm like, I just want to edit the podcast. There's got to be
an easier way.
Yeah, hire someone.
Somebody's gonna make some software that's gonna make it as easy as like putting 2 markers down and then not having to worry about it. You know what I hate about the micro content? When I see micro content and I'm like, I just want to grab this and be able to put it in a carousel, but it's like the Zoom feed and you have to crop it in on Premiere and take all the extra steps. So irritating.
It's really irritating, and I'm realizing like we should be putting captions on our clips.
For sure.
But you know how long that takes?
Yeah, awful. It was the worst thing that you had to do when I worked at TSN. It was like the thing that I resented doing.
Well, you definitely didn't watch the live stream I did with Mo that you bailed on. But anyways, I did the live stream. I was super nervous. I'll give some backstory on that in a sec. But in that live stream, he dropped a couple like video editing apps that like auto do captions really easy. Put like that little like timeline thing in the video. So I'm gonna like go back and download those apps. That'll probably automate our process. I want to dive into that IG live. I've never done an IG live in my life. Never done live streaming. I'm not a good on air guy. Like I get fucking nervous. Same. I have to like I'm like sweating. My heart's racing. I stumble my words and. Like I have to do a breathing exercise. I've said this on the pod.
Mo is like the complete opposite. Like he's so outgoing. He's so charismatic.
Good. He fucking carried that live stream. I was like, thank God, Mo, you're a stud.
Someone showed up.
Holy shit, he's great. Made my life easy. So originally he on the podcast was like, yo, like we should do a live stream like on IG like before like the pod drop. Like I'm down.
Yeah.
So I thought he meant on his page because I've seen him live stream with a bunch of people like on his page. I thought he was doing it. So like I messaged him again for the pod drop. Yeah, let's do the live stream, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, sounds good. I'm like getting ready with like, you know, I'm thinking this is what he's going to ask me. I'll answer this. And then like literally like 30 minutes before I'm like, hey man, like you ready to do this? Like, what do you want to talk about? And like, he was it felt like he was like weirdly asking me like, what's on your mind, dude? Like, what do you want to talk about? I thought he was teeing me up. I'm like, we'll talk about this, blah, blah, blah. Then literally like 2 minutes before he's like, I'm ready whenever you are. I'm like, all right, sounds good. I'm ready too. And then there's like a pause and he's like, you gonna invite me to the IG live? And like,
because you would assume that it was going on his page.
Yeah. I don't know how to IG live. It's easy. I'm not a boomer. Not there yet. It's pretty close, easy, but I'm still like, what the fuck? I didn't set up my light. Like I had to like set up all this shit.
Stress.
And I had to go from guest mode where I'm like answering questions and talking
driving the bus.
To driving the bus. Yeah. And that mind switch, I was tired and like freaking out, super stressing
about the questions that you were gonna ask him.
And he nailed it. He literally like would just talk for like long periods of time, drop knowledge on people, and I just sat there smiling and nodding. So it was fucking great. You know, had the chain out, had to flex. You know,
that's the first thing I noticed.
Literally,
the very first thing I noticed. I texted him right after it.
The IG live drops, and he's just like, "Don't tell me you intentionally brought the chain out." And then I fucking withered away into my bed, cringing because I did try to look cool.
Chain out just for the IG live. Live is super interesting. I'm going to go on a tangent here. Live is interesting because everything that we do is on demand now. Like if you log on Instagram, you log on YouTube, like you're not searching for anything in particular. Whereas like a live, if you had to click on, like if I see Pigsy or if I see like one of our friends, like I'm going to take everything that I was doing and like shove it aside just to watch live, which makes it like fascinating to me. It's like something that you have to choose to do.
Yeah, live is interesting because
as stressful as it is.
It's very stressful, but like I left that live. I was stressed during it, but I left it like alive.
Yeah.
Was that a pun? What is that? Anyways, I left it like feeling really like fresh and good. Like there's something exciting about it, and it kind of makes me think like it'd be fun to do a lot. I know Mose does it too, but it'd be fun to do those. We had 15,
program them in weekly.
There was 15 people watching at one point, or like 18 or something like that, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah,
like, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah,
Mose came in. Shout out Mose. Life's a Wreck podcast merch drop coming soon. I maybe have spoiled that. I don't know, but check it out.
I don't know if we can say that. I saw it on the Snapchat though. Looks fire.
Looks looking good.
Looks very like hip.
But I want to get into. So I was watching a bunch of Impulsive clips last night of like them like beefing, like yelling at each other,
or
like
beefing amongst each other,
and a couple guest ones, but rare.
They get heated.
But like between dude, Jake Paul one time
called out Mike. I know this.
Did you watch that?
Yeah,
like
I watched
hard,
that. Yeah,
hard.
Yeah,
like
and Mike dismantled him after.
Mike went off and like crushed him, but. There was that one time, and then there was one time they had Jake Paul on again, and then JP? Mike was like sweating like crazy, like he was just like I don't know what was going on, probably anxiety attack, and Jake Paul's like, "Are you always profusely sweating? Like what's going on?" He's just like, "Yeah, man." He like left for 5 minutes to like change his shirt and like come back, and he came back like this, like he sat down and goes, breathed into the mic like shaking. And I was like
he ran the beep test
clearly
after
having
slamming BK for lunch.
clearly having an anxiety attack. But that long tangent aside, the point of me bringing that up is like I feel like what is nice to listen to is like some honest, hard chat. So I want to ask you, like I asked, what do you hate about the podcast? What do you hate about working with me? And I'll say what I mean. I think
I have a laundry list of stuff that I could talk about, and I'm sure
he never tells me. I ask him, tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm gonna push boundaries. You gotta fucking keep me in check.
What do I hate about working with you? So the biggest thing that I don't think that we've talked about this even privately before, but I do think that we have two very different aesthetic tastes. Where I'm like, I like pushing stuff, and like my biggest thing is that I like work and ideas that are wrong, like technically wrong, but are interesting. Whereas I think that you are very focused on stuff that's like technically right, but sometimes I think is uninteresting at times. Where it's like that text isn't legible, or like that's not in the right position. But I almost think that like sometimes even having something wrong is interesting because it'll like stop somebody in their tracks and say like, oh, why did that person do that?
Like when the text is like smaller and I can't really read it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we have different aesthetic tastes.
100%.
And I think part of it's that you're a videographer and I'm a designer. Like I know video, but I'm not, I would never call myself like a videographer.
I think you're sort of right with the video graphic thing, but I think what's more accurate is I think creatives like fall on a spectrum. There are creators like me who like I'm creative, but like I'm not out of the box creative. Like I'm very much within.
What does that mean?
So the box I think is you learn a set of rules and principles when creating something. We're gonna stick with video. Like what is like the fundamentals and what's like status quo.
Yeah.
And then there's creators like Gibson Hazard, and I think like you too. And that's why I always hit you up like, what do you think of this video? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Because you're very outside of the box creative. You're a big thinker, big like try new things, incorporate old ideas with new and stuff. And you like really think about what you're making. Yeah. Whereas I'll think about it, but I don't go deep, and I don't. And you make jokes about me. This was a funny one. You said you're like, well, I'm not like you where I just shut off my brain and just edit a whole video in a couple hours and just not think about it. I'm like, as much as like that's obviously a joke, and I do think about shit, but it's kind of true.
Yeah.
Like I will just like get it done.
Something that works.
And it's not necessarily like innovative or groundbreaking, but
tasteful still.
It's not, this isn't Mose saying I'm bad, or I'm not saying I'm bad either. I'm just saying it's fitting into a box.
Yeah.
And I think you're outside of a box. And that's where, like we said earlier, filling in each other's gaps.
Yeah. I think it's healthy.
You're very creative, and I'm very like execute like business.
Yeah.
And like rigid and robo and shit. Like you always call me RoboCop.
RoboCop.
That's where we play into each other. So I can see where there's like disagreements. And I think the most important thing is like, I just take the L's. I'll back down and take the L's, because what is that even worth the emotional stress to be like, no, we should do this content idea. We should do this or this. It's like, let's just get it out, and we're going to learn what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And we're wasting so much energy like arguing or complaining.
Absolutely. And I think on the flip side, if that's you staying in the box and like making something that's tasteful, but not pushing any boundaries, I think the flip side of that is that I push a bunch of work out that sometimes doesn't make sense, and it's like too far on the out of box side, where I'm like, I post it and then I'm like, oh wait, this didn't resonate or this didn't hit because it was like too far outside of.
You spend a little too much time on shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, because you get really like, all creatives are very emotional.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not as emotional about like my babies and my work, and like it's called like killing your darlings or something. Yeah. Like moving on to the next. And I think you dive really deep into
sometimes, absolutely,
and put yourself in your work.
Yeah.
And that can get dangerous when it's like, dude, we just need something.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Let's go. It's 7:00.
I have always struggled to hit that balance for sure.
It's just it comes over time. I think it also comes with like age and just being like, I don't know, you just like go through the motions enough. You just learn from what doesn't work.
Yeah. And I've gotten better. I think that like before I worked at TSN, like it was awful, where I was like, I'm just pushing stuff that I like. And then working at TSN, it was definitely this transition of like, oh, we need, and I mean, like anyone who I worked with at TSN would tell you that like I was still bad at it, where I was like, this just needs to be like, we have like breaking news, like we just need to put this in a template and get it out, because that's all this is. But it was definitely a struggle where I'm like, sometimes you don't need the craziest thing. Sometimes like you're just posting this because it's information, and that's fine. I think the bigger point it comes back to is that like the context within that we're working in now, like so often we're just shipping work that's going to end up on a glass screen, and sometimes I think that does get lost from like I want to have fun and try stuff out, but at the end of the day, like it's just going to get put into a feed and people are going to see it, so it almost like defeats the purpose sometimes.
Yeah, I think we've seen it in work where like I've like got you some jobs and like I'm like in there consulting, project managing, and like the client is like, I want this done, and you're like pushing back so hard because you spent all this time and maybe you're thinking a million things. But from what my biggest takeaway was like, you're putting in emotional energy, and you're like, how many more times am I gonna like start up this emotional
Train,
or car? And I think it stifles and ruins the conversation to get to the best idea, because your idea is not the best, the client's idea is not the best. That's not right. One of the ideas is better, or an amalgamation is, but oftentimes it's never like an argument and
you always have to compromise. I think
a discussion of what we should do and whatever it is, whatever like work it is. It's not whose idea is the best. It's just what idea is the best.
Yeah,
you got to take yourself out of it. And I think when we started working a lot together, and I would need you to do things for me, or I did things for you, like I always came at the approach of like, dude, this is why I think it's good for these reasons, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that those are wrong? Like fight my reasons and my
Push
idea,
back.
not me.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get to the best idea. I don't care if it's your idea. I just want the best product.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a hard thing, I think, mainly for young people, because we're just more emotional. You can see it, like young people are more empathetic and more, emotionally charged. So you just got to like let that go.
Yeah.
And just move on.
And the only way that you do that is making more work. I want to go back to Giz and Hazard because that's somebody that I've been like watching over the Christmas break. His style, we did a podcast earlier that we can link in this one. But one thing that I want to talk about that I don't think that we talked about before, everyone looks at Giz and Hazard's work and they're like, this is incredible. And I think for the most part, it's because like it's so different than everything else that's out there. But I was actually like retracing some of the concerts and stuff that he's done. And part of the reason I think that he's been able to like carve out this niche and this style that everyone's like, I see this and I know this is a Gibson Hazard video, is because like it's on top of great lighting. Like people, stage lighting, stage design, those people get paid a lot of money to make those artists look good. And I don't think that we think about all that all the time. I was watching this documentary on Netflix about this stage designer named Ez Devlin, and she's fantastic. Like she made she's done Kanye, Beyonce, Jay-Z, like all the big A-list music celebrities, all of them. And her work is like almost in the background of his work. And it's like he is being brought on to kind of like video that, but also like layer his own like interpretation or like creative flair on top of that. But nobody else thinks about that. They always think like, oh, it's the transition, or oh, it's the lighting. But it's like all of these things that came before he ever picked up a camera that like enabled those conditions to happen. And it's been so interesting for me to like jump into that rabbit hole and like really like look into everything that kind of like came before he ever like picked up the camera.
Right. And in addition, like piggybacking on that, it's like, I think everyone has those tools that you're bringing up. It's not just Gibson Hazard. Anyone who's doing a concert thing has the stage design and the lighting, but it's almost like, I don't know if he actively did this in his brain, but like the way he looks at the field he's playing on and all the tools, whatever it is, he is able to utilize them in his own way. That's so creative with like the stage design. And if you look at the Travis Scott one he did from like 2016, like they had the eagle and the bird and shit, and like he just used all that. Or even Drake with the Scorpion tour, like he's just utilizing like he's utilizing the tools that he's given to at the concert in a way that just it's so, I don't even have words to describe this. I haven't thought about it enough, but I just think the way he's using the tools he's given is just what has propelled him. I think he's laid into that. Yeah. That might be what your point is. Like what's so interesting about him is that he's really leans into those tools of set design, the lighting that he's given, and everything. And that's what's setting him apart. Whereas I look at a lot of concert videos and they don't really use
shot of the crowd and then shot of the performer and then.
But he's going into like the actual design of what like what is the art direction of this tour and how can I implement this in the video?
Yeah. And I think like part of that is that he is like embedded himself in the tour. Like it's not like he's just like doing one concert here and one concert there. Like with Drake, he followed him throughout the tour. And then the video is like the end product of like months and months and months of like being there, like absorbing everything, the experience it was to be at that concert, which is so interesting. And like part of it's like, where else, if you're a videographer, are you going to get a scene where it's like the stage is like being video mapped and there's like a shark underneath? Like there's so much visual interest there where it's like, instead of fighting against that or just shooting Drake or just shooting the crowd and being like generic, it's about like taking the ideas and whatever you're seeing on the screen and like extending that conversation, like really like bringing out what's the message there and just like creating something where you couldn't get it before. And where I want to segue into is that like we had Leo the creator on, and he mentioned the person that runs it's Josh Blessing. I don't know what the production company is, but I sent you a couple videos where I can send you one right now, where it was like they don't just do video, they do a bunch of like work with sports teams where they spend days building these sets, and they have like crazy lighting, and they have like scenes that you would never be able to you'd never be able to capture straight out of your camera, because like they've been very intentional about like creating that scene.
You're talking about Elite Edge?
Elite Edge, yes. Yeah, I blanked on the name.
Elite Edge, like
Productions, yeah, unreal. And they're able to create scenes and like images. I think what this comes back to is like how outside of what's just being shot like straight out of your camera, like how do you build an image with interest that like you can't get anywhere else? And that's where I'm like, if you are a videographer, if you are a designer, I look at like the market kind of in a bigger sense where it's like there's all of this talent pouring in. We talk about a bunch of people on TikTok or on Instagram where it's like, this person isn't exceptional technically, but it's like they have created a story or they like made this their own. I think the example that you had the other week was this videographer or photographer that like set up the story beforehand where it was like, oh, I found this random couple on the street, now I'm going to give them Christmas photos. And it's like, you've taken the end product, the photo, and you've added this story on top of it, and it's made it like so much more interesting, where I think that is just going to continue to happen more and more, where it's like the craft or the end product itself, it's being disrupted by like where the content lives and like what you can do to set up beforehand, whether that's like building out a set, whether that's like being on a music tour. It's like, I think what's being made is changing more and more and more than we saw when we started in school in 2016.
But those are two different things.
They are.
You're referencing Josh Blessings and Elite Edge, and then you reference this TikToker Alex Stemp, who does incredible TikToks where he like does an act of kindness, goes up to random people, takes photos. One, Elite Edge is being pretty for the sake of being pretty.
Yeah.
There's no story.
And taking that to an extreme.
It's just design and like art direction that's like pretty to be pretty and technical to be technical. But the Alex Stemp guy, like his photography is not like out of this world, amazing Sam Damashek quality or whatever, but he plays into the human experience with a lower level of production. So those are two different things. I don't know if you can compare them, because
I would say that they're on like two ends of a spectrum, where one's like we're pushing production as far as we can, and the other's we're like we don't have much production, but we're gonna like innovate and create a story around it.
Yeah, and as a content creator, you have to think like, I think the pinnacle is using both, where you tell a story that's high production and really pretty, or not tell a story. Telling a story is too vague. Like telling a story of the human experience, and meeting that with production, high quality design and art direction. That's like the pinnacle. But it's something I think I struggle with a lot, is trying to understand what the human experience is and tap into that. That's what people want to consume more than anything. I think even a Gibson Hazard where it's like technically beautiful, most of his stuff doesn't tap into what it's like to be a person. Yeah. And people can't connect with it the same way. They just go, this is really pretty. Yeah. Like, how do you influence and attract the world? It's like, you have to lean into like what people feel day to day or week to week or whatever.
The feeling that couple got when they're like surprised by this photo shoot and it's so romantic, and they had this moment.
Yeah, how many people are in the Christmas time with their girlfriend or boyfriend? Yeah, whatever. Like
beautiful setting. It's like the Christmas market. It's like if we could have a photo here, we would have loved that, but that experience wasn't possible before this like content format with photographers or videographers like caught fire, and now it's like, a photo doesn't catch on, but like a photo with a story before it might get like 1 million to 2 million views, which is crazy.
So I want to go back a bit.
Okay.
Is there anything else you hate about working with me?
Anything else that I hate about working with you?
The reason I ask this is because I'm trying to stick it to you and I, is because I've had some people say to me, they're like, I love when you guys banter and like talk between the two of you and not get too big ideas. Like they like the big idea stuff, sure, but also like they like us.
The buzz.
So what, like, if there is nothing, like we can move on and maybe I can
Perfect.
say my thing, but whatever you
It's
want.
myopic. No. I think like it's a double-edged sword. Like we said, we kind of started this conversation by saying that like you map skills that I don't have or that I'm weak in, and part of that is like you are so focused on like pushing out ideas and the execution of the ideas and like getting those ideas out in the process of doing that. And I think a lot of the times like you catch me when I'm like reading something or when I'm like not working,
Going off on a rant.
going off on a rant.
I'm like, whoa, let's get out of the clouds for a second. Can we get on the ground?
I have this great idea that I have to tell you about, and I'm gonna forget it if I don't tell you right now. And then you're like, no, we have to post this Instagram thing. Like, have you started working on it? I was like, oh, no, I haven't.
Because that's the shitty part.
That's the part of like the work that you don't want. Like, the idea is so sexy, and it's like you're so naive to like what it's gonna take to get that idea out in the world. So a lot of the times it's like my frustration is sometimes and part of this is that like you live in Toronto, I live in Thunder Bay. We don't have like a perfect transparency with like what we're doing with our time. And that's changed a lot. Like we had a big conversation before we went on Christmas break about like scheduling days just to make content, scheduling days just to do podcasts. So that's going to help a lot. But the friction that I felt was like, sometimes I'm going to be like thinking about an idea or like trying to like ideate and come up with new stuff. And think about like the strategy of the podcast, and then you come in and you're like, that's great, but we need something that's going to move that forward. And it comes back to like, you text me at 12 in the morning in the afternoon. You're like, have you started yet? ? And I'll see it and I'll be like, fuck, I have to start. Okay. And then an hour will go by and I haven't responded, but I've been working on this project or this carousel, this IG post for the hour. And you're like, dude, what the fuck? Where are you? And I'm like, I've been working on it, but I just forgot to text you. So I think communication has been a point of friction for sure for me.
Yeah, I think that's something, if I were to say I hate such a strong word. I don't really hate anything about you, but we're going to do it just for the content. But
Not the best communicator?
no, it's just, yeah, I guess it's just like, I think the biggest problem is not being next to each other. Like at school, like when you're there around, like I can just like, yo, I need this.
What are you doing?
And there's that energy
Yeah.
transfer where you're like, okay, I got to go. Whereas
Yeah.
text, it's like you can see it and just like go about your business. All I need is a K.
Yeah.
Even that, if that seems
And
disrespectful,
I
KK or
forget
whatever.
to do it like a lot of the time, like a bunch, so often.
I think so many people are like, I'll do that sometimes too. For me, I don't reply to some things because I'm like, I have text anxiety.
Absolutely.
Like I get anxious when I'm like, someone's like, I need this thing, or like, what's going on with this? And I go, I don't know what to say right now, even though like I'm working on it. Like I just like will like leave it on red or like not
Yeah.
reply for a long time. And it's like, just do the thing. I think a lot of people connect with that. Like it is like, do you deal with anxiety when it comes to like texting, or is it
Not texting in general, but like more specifically if there's like mutual agreement that something has to get done that day and it's either not started or not finished, or I'm like, instead of texting him back and like breaking up my flow, I can just like keep working on this for 30 minutes and I'll be done, and then I'll post it and he'll see it. Like that is the rub for me, where I'm like, I don't want to like break whatever I'm doing to like respond to somebody, even if it's going to take like a second, because the flow for me is where like we have this kind of running joke that a lot of the time I'm a guy where it's like an idea comes and you just like run with it, or like something will go in one ear and like just completely go out the other one. And I'm very like, I guess it's kind of a form of being impulsive, but at the same time, the benefit of it is like I will get like in my mind, I will get farther faster just by like working on the thing or whatever I'm doing,
But
versus
the
like
appearance of that-
responding.
But when you do that, the appearance of that to outsiders is like you're
This
aloof.
guy doesn't care.
You're
Yeah,
aloof.
aloof.
It's not like doesn't care. It's like you do care, because I talk to you and people talk to you and they go, this guy like really cares
Cares a
about
lot.
a lot.
Yeah.
Like more than a lot of people
Average people.
about what you're doing. But when you are, I guess it's just aloof. It just seems like you're just like not a pro.
Yeah.
I guess like that's a word I can think of. It's like a pro always shows up,
Yeah.
always on time, always
Yeah.
like ready and listening. But it's not like, I wouldn't say you're not a pro. Like you are a pro.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes the
that
appearance,
layer of communication on top of whatever you're doing.
It's just like the practicum group at school, our final project, we were doing a big doc, and I thought like you would be a great asset to have on the team, but people had like a idea of you based off of certain interactions where they're like,
Patterns
no, this
in the
guy's like
past.
aloof, he's not reliable, even though like you are reliable. It's just if the circumstance isn't like good, you're not going to be reliable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of fair.
I would say that I am. There's a lot of times where I'm unreliable, but on the flip side of that, it kind of like feeds back into the work.
No, but the thing is, like, shouldn't be a bash. I'm not bashing you. Like, I've seen you absolutely like change like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, you used to be way more unreliable, showing up 2 hours late to hang out, or like not doing.
I don't think I ever showed up 2 hours late, but I was like consistently like an hour late, or it was
no,
like
there was some 2 hour.
Or it was like we'd be hanging out and then I would go down to my room to like work on something because I had an idea and I'd be like, I'm just grabbing a glass of water or a beer, guys. And then like I'd come back 30 minutes later and I'd be like, where did you go? And I was like, oh, well, I was working on this graphic. It was great. I got it done. And you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing?
Or even on the work side, not just hanging out, like, just like there's been times where like you were supposed to give me something that you never did and I had to make it my own and it was terrible. But I've seen a noticeable change. I think that's what's admirable, is that people have certain character traits, but over time you fight them and you beat them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, I don't care about what you are right now, but if in the future you change and like you're actively working on it, like that's so fucking powerful in my eyes.
It's great.
I've just seen it in a couple people in my life. I'm like, holy shit. Like you listen so and you're like moving in a good direction.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do. Over time, like you're making all these actions, you're doing all these reps of like behavioral traits or things that you do, and you're like kind of carving this groove out in your life, in your person, and your character. Mm-hmm. And when you carve out that groove so deep, it's hard to like hop out of it to get into creating a new one and adapting to something new. And it's just it's so hard to fucking change.
It just becomes automatic at one point.
But what do you think there needs to be like a catalytic? Is that a word? Catalytic? Or a catalyst where something hits you really hard, you hit rock bottom, and then you break that groove?
Yeah. Well, I think it happens in one of two ways. Either that happens where it's like, I think there's a great, do you know who Jace Jarvis is? He's like very, very famous action photographer. And now he started this creative business is very similar to the future where like they have on-demand videos. Anyways, he was this action photographer. He did huge shoots with all like the big names in the action sports. And then he was on a shoot at a mountain one day. Avalanche hits. He gets buried in it. Everyone that he's with gets buried in it. And he had one of those moments where it's like, something has to change. I think he was like unprepared or something, but he had that moment and he was like, I'm not stretching myself with photography anymore. I need to do something else that's going to like activate me creatively. So it can happen in that way where it's like this one-time thing that just like changes you. I think for me, with what we were talking about before, and for a lot of things, like I would be the first to say that I'm very slow to change. And it's something that happens over like months and months where you're like, at first you notice it and you might ignore it. You're like, it's not a big deal. But as it happens like more consistently and you keep noticing it, it's something for me where I'm like, okay, I know that I'm unorganized. I know that I lose files sometimes when I'm like on a big project. Like I need to care more about organization because it's getting in the way of the creative. It's getting in the way of the final product. Mm-hmm. So I think it happens in two ways. And I think it's different for everyone.
And I think it's just like when you're playing sports, everyone reacts differently. I remember when I played sports and my coach yelled at me and was like,
didn't respond well.
You fucking idiots, God, put some muscle on it. I did not react well.
Yeah.
I
think I'm the opposite.
Negative reinforcement. I need something like, dude, you did it wrong. This is how you do it right.
Yeah.
Let's adapt here, okay? Like, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I need that. Whereas you're the kind of guy where, like, if I'm, like, tough on you, like, you don't shut down.
No.
If I have reasons
like
to be
it
tough,
more.
you like it more.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's hard when you work with clients. Like, people, like, let's say you're, like, shitting the bed on something. Like, they're like, I don't know what to say to Mose.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it. I'm like, and I explain what it is. Like, you just got to be hard. And they're like, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So it's tough to balance
for
that.
sure. Which is why I think like the projects that we've worked on, what I found helpful with you is that like I can always trust that you're going to be honest and you're going to have like a very objective view of things, where I think sometimes I lose that for sure. And I do respond better to like, it's funny because I don't think that I respond particularly well to criticism, like regardless of who it comes from. But I do think that I do respond to people that are kind of more like hard nosed.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I think you
very
respond
blunt.
pretty well, as long as there are for sure facts and like points.
Yeah.
Not just like it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Like what
I
does
hate
that mean? All right, so we were talking a lot about the negative stuff,
that we hate.
but let's go into what we fucking love about the podcast. And you were saying something before we just took a little pee break there. You have a book underneath your mic
Your
right now.
book.
Well, my book.
Your book.
It's The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And Mose just learned the other day, apparently, that J.R. Tolkien, the writer of Lord of the Rings, and some other fantasy writers, along with C.S. Lewis, who wrote Narnia, they were all in like a writing group.
Yeah.
They like came and like exchanged ideas and just like chatted how to make their worlds better and bigger. And you were saying something about how that kind of relates to our podcast.
I do. I think one of the most surprising things and one of the things that I love the most about doing this and then doing this for 4 months, much different than just like having 5 podcasts out there, is that there's like this community building around what we're doing. And that was something that I never saw coming, but it's something where I'm like, oh, now I have like 5 to 10 like new people that I can just bounce ideas off of. And they're like so psyched. They're like, oh, I wish I had this person when I started out. Because I think one of the things I struggle with sometimes is that I will have an idea that I think is sick in my head, but I'm like, do other people think this is good? Like, I have no like barometer of quality outside of like my own bubble. And that's one of the things that I've loved, like working more closely with you, but also having like this kind of bigger community of people around us where it's like, I don't have to always go to you now. Like I can ask like a videographer or like a designer, like, is this cool? Is this good? And I didn't have that community before. So that was awesome to like see develop and like grow organically.
And it literally started just DMing. Hey, what's good? Like I have this podcast. We talk about a lot of stuff you talk about and what you do. Love to have you on. And I found all the people who got back to me, they ended up following me and like interacting with our stuff. They love our page. They're super cool guys.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like whenever coronavirus ends and we can go to the States again, because most of these guys are from the States, like we had Blaze. He's like, dude, whenever you're in LA, let's fucking buzz.
Same with Raw Jules. Like he's in that area as well.
Yeah. He's south. He's San Diego, but
2-hour drive. 3 with traffic.
4 with traffic. Anyways, but seriously, like the community building off this podcast, like that's what I'm loving the most. And like, ever since we started doing 2 podcasts a week or doing just more episodes recording, like I've found I've gotten better at talking and it's just like opened us up to so many more people because the more podcasts we do, the more reach we get because people who are on the podcast share it on their pages, whether they have 2,000 followers, 500, 3,000, 6,000, whatever it is. Like we're getting so much more exposure off of that. And other people that are similarly minded to their guests that we have on, they're following us. And who knows, we're going to have them on probably too. Because we want to talk to more people who maybe aren't as known or are as known as a big guy like a Gibson Hazard. And just like hearing their ideas, I just want to like dive into more.
Yeah.
It's just like a connection. Like you can tell like when we're talking to some of these guys, they're like, oh, these guys get it.
Yeah.
They're not just some like random media outlets. Like, oh no, they're like us.
Yeah.
They just do a podcast.
Yeah. Which
So
I've loved.
I love that. But another thing I love with the podcast, I kind of like editing the podcast.
Really?
It's fun. I like editing it and getting it done.
Yeah.
That feels good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this sounds good. But man, the micro content, ugh. But yeah, I think the recording and the editing, I love interacting in the DMs and like networking. I love that stuff. So it's going to be tough because one day we got to like get an editor for the podcast just to save time.
Yeah.
Because what I'm finding fruitful, and we talked about this with Mo, is like, what are the things that you love the most? What are the things you dislike the most? And focus more on what you love and then delegate work to an employee of what you don't love. But also like find out what is going to give you the most percentage of like progression and productivity for the least amount of work, or what gives you the most productivity that makes you the most fulfilled, and like dive into that. Like for me, it's interacting in the DMs and networking. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And the more I did that, I saw the more our podcast grew.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, when do you make that decision to, you know, let go of the things you don't like that much that take up a lot of time?
Yeah. And I think it's scary too, because you're like handing off your child as well, your little baby, to an editor where you're like, I can't guarantee that this person like knows all of like the intricacies that go into this.
Or like, how do we want to be perceived?
Yeah.
And like, does he edit it? And then we
Yeah.
watch it. We have to watch our podcast after our editor edits it.
Yeah.
Like, fuck. Or if we say some dumb shit,
Yeah.
that's like really like offensive.
And the person doesn't think it's offensive, so they leave it in.
That's why you get. I have a close friend who does audio really well. Maybe I'll hire him.
Yeah, there
Who
you go.
knows? You know,
Unnamed
spread the
close
wealth.
friend. What else has surprised you about doing the podcast?
What does surprise me?
Outside of like the people, I think the people's the obvious one for me, where it's like I didn't know that this community was so willing, I guess, and like excited. Like how many times have we thought about bringing somebody on, and then I'm like, okay, just like reach out to them and see what they say. Like maybe they say no, and then you'll go back and you'll be like, oh, they're like so excited to get on.
They're like, yo, man, this is dope. I love your page.
Yeah,
Like I'd love to come on and chat.
yeah.
It's like, whoa, I did not expect
No.
that. That surprised when Mo got back to me.
Yeah,
I was like, what the fuck?
yeah.
Like this guy has time for a podcast, and we really appreciate you coming on, Mose. Like it was Mo, not Mose. It was funny though on that podcast. Just to go back to some stories from the pod, he called you Mosey, and he thought that was your name. Did you
Yeah.
not notice that?
No.
He was like, "Do I call you Moses or Mosey? What is it?" And you're just like, "Oh, it's Mose." He's like, "All right, Mosey." And he
Yeah.
started calling you because I was editing it. And I saw.
I mean,
he's
there's
like,
a million different ways that you can say it.
but it's so funny
So
to think
used to
that he
it
thinks
at
that's
this
your
point.
name. It's so funny. It's just Mose. But like, what surprised me with the podcast, really just the fact that we're getting these guests, and I'm really not someone comfortable being like, I like being the center of attention with my friends.
Yeah.
Like, you know me, I can be loud and like
Love
a dick
groups.
and say abrasive shit,
Abrasive. Yeah, that's putting it lightly.
abrasive stuff to like people. I can be a little like, I don't know, it can come across wrong.
Yeah.
Bad filter.
For sure.
Just ask my girlfriend. And what was I gonna say? Well, what surprised me is like how comfortable I've got talking to new people.
And you wouldn't have seen that coming before
No.
you started the podcast.
Dude, I remember that first podcast. My heart was racing as
It
I'm
was
like,
just
I have
us.
the intro.
Yeah.
I gotta say like, "What's up, guys? Welcome back."
Yeah.
Like,
comment, and subscribe.
or at the end, like I was like scared in front of like a guest to be like, "All right, guys, make sure to follow us here." Blah blah blah, like that content creator thing. But like,
Now it's natural.
it's just well, no, it's not natural yet. But it's like getting there.
Mhm.
That's what I'm surprised at. Is like, holy shit, I didn't think I'd be comfortable. Like I've
Mhm.
never been good presenting in school. Always
Same.
freak out, sweating,
Same.
like fucking turning beet red, like just like losing my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'm surprised about. But like, what about you?
I think one of the things that surprised me about making content and like putting it out is how difficult even like the smallest of stuff is. Like even exporting a video in Premiere or like resizing a Zoom feed to fit like 1:1 or like 16 or 9:16. Like it's all the small stuff that you don't think about, but it like really adds up where it's like, this is difficult. And it'd be so easy to just like hand that off to somebody. And I think what we've talked about before, maybe not on the podcast, is like the execution of stuff, like the small stuff that I just mentioned, is getting cheaper and cheaper to like hand off. Where it's like, I know people that have like very large podcasts with like millions of followers, and they pay somebody, I think it's like $9 to $12 international to like handle everything with the podcast, where like they record and they send all their files off and they don't worry about it, and they have a new podcast coming out every single week.
Or even twice a week. And I
Yeah.
think what we started this podcast and we both agreed this is like not gonna be our thing.
Yeah.
It's just part of our overall like work and lifestyle
Yeah.
and what we want to do. But as we've noticed, doing 2 podcasts a week, making all the micro content, it's kind of our thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if a podcast is something that should ever be someone's thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe that, because it should be a way to get your ideas out and get people to understand who you are and get
Mhm.
micro content off of. But like, you gotta like have a more rounded, I think, not you gotta, like, what am I saying? Like, you have to do this or that. Like,
you know.
yeah, like I fucking know. But I do think, like, I guess for me, I don't want it to be my thing. I just want to be part of the giant spider web that
Yeah.
I've made of what I enjoy to do.
What I find awkward is always like when it comes up in conversation, like classic Christmas
Oh.
dinner scenario where like, oh, I don't think even at this point right now I'm comfortable saying like, oh, I do a podcast, because I don't think that the podcast is the full-time thing. I think the podcast supports so much other stuff on top of it, whether it's like connecting with new people, finding new clients, getting your worldview out there, like all of that stuff that it enables. But I don't think the average person would understand that that's like what the podcast is for.
Well, also, like, I always get really uncomfortable. I usually don't bring it up. And my girlfriend was like,
Like,
dude,
hide it.
just be like super confident about it. Just like stand up straight when someone asks, like, what are you doing? And just fucking say it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see, like, she's like, I think you'll actually be more confident on the podcast.
Yeah.
If you talk outside of the podcast about your podcast,
Yeah.
it's going to be more interesting. And some people are going to be dicks and be like, oh, every fucking guy under 30 or girl under 30 like has a podcast. They think they're so special. These like Zoomers and millennials and shit.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, you just got to own it. When we were starting out, and even kind of now, it's like people say, oh, what's your podcast about?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
so broad.
Fuck. But now we just talk to creators, we talk to marketers, and we just like chat about our experiences, the stories, maybe some tidbits they can give, some knowledge, some information value. But at the beginning, it's like you kind of say, I'm doing this podcast. They say, what's it about? And I kind of just like was like giving an answer where they're like, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
You guys don't even know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing.
They don't even know what they're doing. Why would I listen to it? So it's like you almost have to have just a script ready, which I need to fucking write.
You need the elevator pitch.
Just they say, oh, what are you doing like during quarantine? Oh, I do a podcast and like I'm a videographer as well. Oh, what's your podcast about? And you just fucking have a one sentence. Bang, bang. Boom.
I think they taught us that in school. You might not have been there for that lesson, but that's fine.
Yeah, I didn't really show up to class. I'm a super cool
Hardo.
kid.
Computer desk warrior.
We're going a little long here, so but I want to end on this.
Okay.
Let's reflect on
what are we doing for lunch?
Well, we'll figure that out. We'll give Max Lewis a call. Podcast alumni.
What's your question?
What are some like standout moments on the podcast? What are some like stories where you're like, dude, this is...
The first interview that I thought like went really, really well was Sarah's interview. I thought she killed it. And it was the first time that I've noticed that like you don't necessarily have to be good on air. You don't have to be great at speaking if you can bring the best out of the people that you interview. And that's something that I've been trying to think about more, just like not just the questions that you ask them, but I think a lot of the time it comes down to like, how do you sequence those questions to get the best out of somebody where I'm not like putting them on their heels right away. You're almost like revving up the engine, like building to this thing. And so that's been like, that was probably like the first interview where I was like, I don't think that we were excellent, but like the content and what we covered was fantastic. And I was like, after we did that, I was like, I want to model the other creators and the people that we have on. What else has like stood out was like how different and how like, so we have marketers, we have creators, we have people like Sarah that are kind of like hybrids between the two. And I think different people require like wildly different kind of like questioning and how you adapt to them. And so that is like definitely stood out. Whereas like after the Sarah interview, maybe you tried to like ask the same question to somebody else. And it's like a question that really resonated with her just like fell flat with somebody else. Mm-hmm. So that's something that's definitely been like top of mind for me. And then the Mo interview, I thought he crushed it as well.
Before we go to the Mo interview, that Sarah interview, I thought was like, I think that like changed us in our podcast. Like, hopefully she's listening to this and can hear these compliments, but like talk about a person like you want to be around.
Yeah, it just crushes.
Like not just in her success, but in her, like, I don't care about how good you are, how like successful money you made or numbers you get. It's like, what's your mindset?
Yeah.
Like her brain is like
great vibe.
Like she has energy, she has positivity, she has a work ethic, she has vision, she has execution, Vish. And I was like, I remember we hopped off that interview and I went to go out to meet someone, and we just like talked on the phone in the car, and we were just like buzzing. Yeah. Like we were like, we gotta do this, we gotta do that, blah, blah. Yeah. Like it felt like we just drank an energy drink. Yeah. And it was just like firing away. And I think that's really when we took off with the carousels too. Yeah. And that launched our podcast, I think, to a bigger audience, just like reach wise. But the Mo interview, if you go there, talk about a good interview. Yeah. Like we, not just like what he did, because he can stand alone and just like crush it on his own. But I think the way we handled it too, like we were like messing around with him. We were like laughing and chirping and yelling and shit. It was
also like, getting like the good answers out of him as well.
We got the business serious, but then we also were like laughing. Yeah. Like I love those moments where like he said something and we're like, damn. All right, podcast is over, Mo. Get the fuck out of my Zoom call. Yeah. Like we're good. We got our Myco content.
Yeah. All right, you can go now.
Or when he gave us like that one piece of advice, he's like, "That'll be $500." Like I was crying editing that. I loved that. Oh, speaking of another interview, I loved the Hockey Collective. I've been talking to Patrick and Tex here and there.
Fantastic.
You know, he just hired a intern.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And we like helped. I don't want to take credit, but like that's conversation
been cool as well. That has been cool as well. I know you can finish what you're gonna say.
I'm gonna probably say what you're gonna say is like these conversations with a lot of these guests we've had. It's like they launch or it like opens their mind to different ideas. Not that we're taking credit at all. Like they had these ideas, but like speaking to like-minded people, they go, "Oh fuck, I should be doing that."
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. And then he fucking does it.
Yeah.
And I messaged him about, I'm like, dude, do you get anyone? Like, what are they like? Are they
Yeah.
good? And apparently you got this girl, she's like really good,
Yeah.
hardworking, and,
Yeah.
and wants to like crush it. And I'm just like happy for him. I like
Perfect.
hearing that. And I go to his page all the time to watch the World Junior clips
Yeah.
and stuff. It's really good.
Interesting thing, and I think the Hockey Collective and the thing that you just brought up is a great example of this, where like so the first thing, like when you bring a creator on or you bring somebody who has a page on, and you're on kind of the same wavelength, I think it's awesome because it's like, to what you were saying, like you can spark ideas that they necessarily wouldn't have thought of because like you have a background in creating stuff and they have a background in managing a page, and they're like, this is what I struggle with. And you're like, well, I've been doing this for like the past 3 years. Like, I know how difficult it is. Like, for your peace of mind and just being efficient, like, it would be so much easier if you bring somebody on. And it's like this interesting balance between like, right now, I think that the curators, the people that own the page, are really good at what they do. And that's like building audience, building community, posting the right stuff, curating content.
But before you finish, I think what I did ask him is like, what do you hate?
Yeah.
That's what I asked you at this podcast. Like, what do
Yeah.
you hate about the podcast? We asked him, what do you hate about doing your page? He's like,
Yeah.
finding shit every
Finding
single
content.
day.
Like, it's difficult. More
And then-
difficult than anyone would think.
And then look what he did. He
Yeah.
hired someone to help him with that. Obviously, he still does his own shit and posts
Yeah.
his own stuff because he likes doing that to a certain extent, but it's every day, multiple times
Yeah.
a day.
So much more of a grind. And to what I had said earlier, like, it surprised me how much work this is. But you have this my point was that you have this super interesting overlap between like all of the kind of like potential energy of like curating content is just like, you can multiply that by just bringing somebody who knows like just a little bit about creating stuff.
And it opens up time and space for you to, obviously what's important in life is like talk to your family, talk
Yeah.
to your friends, have a full life, a balanced
Yeah.
life, but also to do the things that are necessary to grow, like
Yeah.
DMing, like work on your merch, your
Yeah.
branding, your
Everything
website, whatever.
outside of like having your fingers on the keyboard. Because that's, I think for creators, for the most part, if I'm talking about most people, it's all about having your hands on the keyboard, figuring out new techniques, pushing out that video. And it's like what we've seen, and we can be like, all the example that I'll give is that like we did one kind of influencer marketing paid post for a very low dollar amount, like less than you might spend going out for a nice dinner. And it was like the single biggest activity that like launched our page into like, we went from like under less than 100 followers to like we tripled that, I think.
to like 250 or
Yeah.
something. And like followers that like still like our stuff and like we
Yeah.
talked to in the DMs, we just like chatted with. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. But is there anything? I'm trying to think of any other moments in the podcast that were really good.
I think bringing on friends has been super fun for me because I'm like, when we are in person or like when we see each other, it's just buzz. But this is like a setting where it's like the context is we're talking about work, we're talking about like what we do, and it's been fun to see their ideas that they don't talk about so publicly. Because I'm like, oh, you have a lot of interesting things to say about
Exactly.
design or about video, and it's like I love that this gives you kind of a place where you're like, you don't feel any pressure to like conform to, oh, this would be like really for lack of a better word, like work focused, or like you couldn't
Mhm.
say this if you're just buzzing with friends.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed having friends on and just like it's also like easier
Yeah,
just to talk
for sure.
to.
For sure.
But I think the more podcasts we do, which we plan to continue to do 2 a week, and we just like chat with more people, like we'll eventually get to that place where I think we're like a Joe Rogan, where like he just like hangs
Yeah.
and just like talks to them and like gets their thing out. Because as much as we think we want to give value, it's like people also just like hearing people talk.
Yeah, for sure.
Like bring back Impulsive again. Mike Malak was talking about like people don't care what he or Logan has to say, necessarily like the topic, subject matter, but
Yeah.
it's like they just like hearing them talk
If
because
you
they
can be
like
entertaining.
them.
Yeah.
They just like them.
Yeah.
It's just like how you sometimes you hang out with your friends. You're like, I don't care what they say. I just like hanging out with my
Yeah,
boys.
absolutely.
It doesn't matter if they like talk about one thing or the other. It's just you just enjoy their time. So that's something I think we want to do with
More
our
of.
podcast more.
So much easier in person.
Oh yeah,
So much
like
easier.
some of the
in person.
critiques on our podcast, a lot of the time they're like, you guys are just like asking questions, you're not talking, like
Yeah.
you're not like hanging out, it's like an interview, like
Yeah.
guys, like loosen up and like have fun. And I
Mhm.
think we've done that more on this podcast here, but moving forward we definitely want to be more, I guess, entertaining and fun. But I think that's it. We should wrap up here. We've had what is this, we're at an hour and a half on the recording.
Wow.
That's a long pod. I
It
could
was
go longer though.
difficult as well. Like I haven't done one in a while, and I was like nervous to start, and then I was like trying to get into it.
Dude, when you walk through the door, I'm like, we're about to do a podcast. I don't want to. Like, I'm having a hard time talking to Mose because I'm
Yeah.
like, I haven't seen this guy's face.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable.
See this guy in an edit suite for like every day for a year, and then quarantine hits and you don't see them for like months.
Imagine when we see Kyle again. How crazy that's gonna be.
Insane.
Well, anyways, let's just wrap this and then we can talk about Kyle forever.
Behind his back.
Hey, buddy blew up on TikTok. Shout out Kyle Moorsey at Moorsey with 3 Y's on TikTok. He's doing
With 3
good
Ys.
stuff. Doing good stuff there. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. Make sure to subscribe and follow all our social media at RnR Repeat Podcast on what is that? Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And make sure you check out the YouTube videos. Like, we post everything on YouTube.
We do.
Like, you get to see our facial expressions, us laughing and smirking, whatever, the fun stuff. And I think it adds more to like the experience if you're interested in that. So follow us on YouTube if you haven't. It's at RnR Repeat Podcast. You'll find us everywhere. All right, Mose.
Amazing.
This was good, man.
This is fun.
See you guys.
We're
Ciao
gonna
bella.
crush some food.
We're eating. Bye-bye.
See ya.